Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to have a look at a quick analysis of Game 7 from the World Chess Championship 2024. The game is played between Gukesh Dommaraju and Liren. Here Gukesh in Game 7 was playing white, and by far this is the most active game with white having so many chances to win. But unfortunately, because of time pressure, Gukesh couldn't find the winning moves, and it eventually ended up as a draw. So it's very interesting. We'll have a look at it. So it starts off with knight f3, the Reti, d5, g6, and these are standard line in the Reti. And then we have after bishop g2, knight f6. After castling here, black castles, and the interesting move played by Gukesh is rook e1. Now this is a novelty, and this has not been played in a grandmaster level so far. So obviously this is all preparation that Gukesh had for this game. So Ding actually thinks for quite a while for this move, and then after that he plays d takes c4. Now this is the obvious move for black, but Ding really didn't want to commit too much. Probably I'm not sure whether he had prepared for this kind of opening, because especially for rook e1, which has not been played at grandmaster level so far. So at least in the database I couldn't find one. So e4 was played, white taking the center, bishop g4, rook b d2, attacking this pawn. And the correct way, I mean, generally speaking, black will play b4 to defend this pawn, but Ding actually here plays c5. Now my explanation for that is because Ding really didn't want to play into Gukesh's preparation, and probably that's why he wanted to throw him off Gukesh's preparation and played c5. But this has quite a few issues for Ding. One thing is it opens up this fianchetto bishop, because now it has full access and there are no pawns blocking that. So d5 was played, and after e6, h3 was played first, kicking off the bishop. The bishop captures the knight, bishop captures the bishop, and after that e takes d5, e takes d5, knight b d7. Now you have to understand this bishop here is quite strong at this point. Here Gukesh takes the pawn. After b5 attacks the knight, knight a3, and knight goes to this square which is not active. They had to either bring it here, or if the pawn moves, bring it here. So after queen b6, we have bishop f4. One thing we have to note is white now has the bishop pair, and it is generally advantageous when we go into the endgame with this with the bishop pair. So rook f e8, the queen moves first, and after the rook moves to d8, we have knight c2, knight goes to f8, and then b4 was played by Gukesh. It's a very interesting move. The whole idea for that is, if the pawn moves forward, Gukesh can actually reroute his bishop and take control of these dark squares, and that's exactly what happens. c4 was played first. He attacks the queen, and when the queen moves, he now goes and takes control of the dark squares. And this is one of the qualities of very strong players. They don't simply go on tactics all the time, they simply play positionally. Gukesh has very good control of the dark squares at the moment. Also, he has potential control of the light squares as well. So first here Ding trades the rooks, and then after that queen takes a2, and now Ding is actually a pawn up, but this is a very committing move. It looks like black's queen is trapped, but it's not actually. Rook a1 was played, queen b3, and then we have rook a3, queen b1 check, the king moves, and then we have rook d7. Here rook a5 was played, attacking this pawn. Obviously the pawn can't come forward because rook will attack that pawn as well. And now after queen b3, there was this check, and there the moves were repeated. Now my understanding for these moves repeated was simply because both of them were in time trouble. As you can see, Ding had only about 15 minutes and Gukesh had 16 minutes, and they have to make another 11 more moves. So, and also these moves are very important because they will decide the course of the game. So that's probably one of the reasons these players actually repeated the moves twice to get up to that, to go on the move count. And after that, in move 29 here, rook takes b5 and it avoids a draw now. At least in 3-4 repetition. So queen b3 was played, offering a trade of queens, and Gukesh declines that by playing queen f4. Now, one thing you have to understand is the correct move here is bishop e3, and this is the engine move. So, for example, if the queens are traded here, now after knight e8, we have bishop e3, and with the pair of bishops, this is a perfectly perfect middle game for white. So, however, in this position, however, Gukesh plays queen f4. The whole idea is to attack this knight, but unfortunately, the knight here is being attacked by the queen. So, queen takes the knight, bishop takes the knight here, and here Ding actually plays queen f5. Again, for the second time in a row, the correct move for white is to bring the bishop back and play to g5, defending the queen. But here, Gukesh actually goes for f5. Queen takes f5, g takes x5. And I feel this is a very good because after the queens are traded, white has definitely an advantage. It's not still winning advantage, but it's definitely advantage which he can convert because of the isolated pawns. 3 isolated pawns in the king side for black, and that would be really helpful for white. On the other hand, white also has a pass pawn. Black also has another pass pawn which white has to look after. So here bishop takes g7, king takes d7, and we now know we are going to go into this end game with a pair of rooks and a bishop and a knight. So rook and a bishop versus rook and a knight is where the end game, our end game is going to be. First rook c5 was played, attacking the pawn. Queen g6, the pawn is taken, and now as we know, Gukesh has an extra pawn. Knight e5 was played, attacking the rook. The rook moves, and here knight goes to c6, attacking the rook again, and as you can see, this pawn is actually pinned, so it cannot move. Rook f4, and then we have knight e7. As you can see, this is a very good knight maneuver, and one of the things we have to learn from strong players is when they are in disadvantage, they simply don't go and simplify this position. They actually use their knights. He used his knight very skillfully to counter attack white and to bring up to this position. Another important lesson I learned as a beginner, that is, if you want to be very successful in chess, you have to be knowing how your pieces work. Especially one of the pieces to master, very hard to master, is actually the knight because of its unusual maneuvers. And here we can see it's a master class by Ding. He actually brought this knight. He counter-attacked white even though white is up a pawn. Here b5 was played, and king f6. I personally believe because he has used his knight very well, he can simply bring his knight to to c8 and then block it off with d6. And as you can see from d6, if the knight is on d6, this bishop will not be able to attack that knight, and also there will be pretty much black can create a fortress by protecting this pawn. This pawn will be protected as well, and the king can actually protect these two pawns in the future, and we can create a fortress. However, that's not what they wanted. He played king f6, and after knight rook d4, we have h6 and king f1. Still no problems for both teams yet, and then we have king e5. Now this is where things get very hard. Now this is definitely an advantage for white, because now rook can come to h4 and attack the pawn. And then after rook to h4, we have first the knight takes the pawn, and here rook takes h6. And as we now know, white has a clear pass pawn on the h file, and this is going to be very, very hard to defend. Knight to c3, attacking this pawn on b5, and then we have rook c6, attacking the knight first. Now remember, you can't simply take this pawn because you obviously have this, and your knight will be lost. So that's one of the reasons the knight didn't take the pawn immediately. So knight goes to e4, and then we have king e1. Now this is a very good advantage for Gukesh. And I would suggest, if you, for example, in this position, if you are really curious and want to improve games, one of the ways of improving your chess skill is to actually create this. For example, we know from the computer perspective, this is winning for white. Just set this position up as white and try to play against the computer and see how far you can go. Whether you can win this, or even if you can draw it, just give it a go and see how it is. My personal view is bishop takes e4. After f takes e4, it's still not tricky. It's still tricky here, but actually it actually simplifies. And then after this pawn is going to be very, very difficult to defend. It's still very tricky, but there are obviously other views as well, which I would respect. But I think simplifying in this position would have been helpful for Gukesh. We have knight e4, and then the king moves here, and then here the f6 pawn was played, and all of a sudden that f6 pawn actually protected by the king, and also the rook does not have the full access it had before. So that's one of the reasons of this f6 move. h4 was played now, and then rook d3 attacking the bishop, bishop d1, and from now onwards it's a drawish position. Actually in the game there was so much hesitation for Gukesh that actually he touched the bishop, he brought it here, and then brought it back up there. So that shows that there was so much hesitation in that move. The whole idea of this move, or for example in this position, the bishop actually guards the b3 square, and then the rook cannot come to b3 behind the pawn. That's probably one of the reasons. But and also it can, literally play to c2 and try to get rid of the knight as well. But here f4 was played. Very tricky move. Now if as we know, when white takes here, now this becomes an isolated pass pawn. As you know, a protected pass pawn is much more harder to defend than an isolated pass pawn. Bishop c2, the rook goes to d5, and then we have rook c4, pinning the knight to the king. The knight is now defended by the pawn. Rook f4, the rook goes behind the pass pawn, and then here king f3. After bishop gives a check, king g2. The king, which was already always here, had come all the way up to all the way come up to here. Now we have rook b3, rook e5, and then f4 was played. Obviously there is this discovered attack possible, so f4 was played to repel that. Rook e7, rook e3, protecting the king, and when we have rook h7. Here h5 was played, and the bishop actually guards the pawn now. Knight f6, both pieces now attack this pawn. The pawn is pretty much gone now. So first rook e5 was played, the knight took h5, rook takes f5, and then knight goes to g3. Rook f8, and as we know now, it's very hard for white to convert this, because even though white is still a pawn up, and we see what happens. Bishop a4 guarding the pawn, king f3 attacking this pawn on f4, f5, king f4 attacking again, and then the pawn moves forward, knight e4, and then we have bishop c2 attacking this knight. Again, this pawn is actually being defended by the rook. Knight d6, rook d8, and the king comes forward and also attacks. It does two things. It defends this knight and also attacks the pawn. Knight bishop b3, defending this f7 square, and now the king has to do something. First, a knight goes to f7, and then after rook d5 checks, king takes the pawn, king d2, and then rook b6, bishop c4, defending the pawn, rook d6, and after king c3, the rooks were exchanged, and then after knight d6, king b4, knight takes b5, king takes b5, a6, and this ended up in a draw. As you know, the bishop alone with the king will not be able to checkmate black. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more videos like this, please like and subscribe, and it's bye for now.